Welcome back to DIY Gamer Lessons. You may notice that we're in a new space. Well, by new space I mean beautiful new colors. Orange, green, some green right there. And of course, the usual component illustrations that you've come to know and love with our Technology Will Save Us videos. So, what are we going to do today, you may ask? Well, you'll recall that we have now got our screen on the, our ship on the screen. We have a way to talk back to ourselves using something called Serial. And of course, we are now just itching to have something to dodge. So today's class, we're going to focus on drawing a wall onto the screen, generating a wall, putting it on the screen, and then of course, ways that we have to use to actually draw that to the screen so that it's very efficient in the world of programming. In later classes, of course, we're going to do things like, move it from right to left, look for collisions, and of course, deal with points and game overs. So, what do we do first? We're going to give ourselves a little list of reminders of what it is that we want to achieve in this lesson. So the first thing we're going to do is draw a wall on the right-hand side. Then we want to draw the wall using something called a for loop. And then we will be very happy with the end of that class. So, to begin with, we are going to, in order to draw a wall onto the screen, let's look at our grid. So, here is our standard grid, which shows us what the screen looks like. I'm going to start off by drawing a wall, let's say in these positions here, from x is equal to 7, so the right-hand side. And to begin with, I'm just going to say y is equal to 2, because we need 2 spaces at least in order to avoid crushing our wonderful Dodge ship. So I'm going to start my wall over there, and I'm going to draw it for 4 pixels high. So what are we talking about there? A starting x position, a starting y position, and a height. Okay, so we're going to create some variables and call them int wall x is equal to 7 in this case, because it's the right-hand side. Int wall y is equal to, in this case, in the way that we've drawn it on grid, y is equal to 2. These are just initial values, they're going to change later. And of course we need a height. Wall height is equal to 4 in this case, because we've drawn a 4 pixel high, 1, 2, 3, 4 pixel high wall. Great. Now, typically how we would draw that to the screen is we would go to our loop. We would, after the clear function, we would start drawing in, draw our wall in. And typically what we would do is we'd say, well, normally we'd say gamer.display, our wall x position, which is 7, and our wall y position, which is 2, is equal to 1. Right, so I set what I've done now is I've set that position to 1. What I then need to do is set that one, and that one to 1 as well. So typically what I would actually do is I'd copy and paste that 3 more times, and I'd say gamer.display wall x, wall y, plus 1, plus 2, and plus 3 are equal to 1. And now let's upload that and see what happens. There it is, we've got a wall on the right-hand side drawing from y equals 2 and 4 pixels high. The problem is, what happens if my height changes to 5? I have to be able to dynamically change how high my wall is going to be drawn in. That's a little bit of a challenge in the way that I've currently programmed it, because then I have to be kind of writing the code for every single wall, which doesn't work at all. But programming languages have this really great method of solving that problem, which is using something called a for loop, okay? So you know how our void loop function is something that goes on and it repeats forever and ever and ever. Well, a for loop, another kind of loop, a for loop, is something that you can create, which you can say what your starting position is, how many times you want to loop it for, and what happens at the end of every loop, okay? That's basically how a for loop works. So for example, we want to say in this case, if we want to convert this stuff into a for loop, we say, if we want to convert this to a for loop, the way a for loop works is there's 3 parts to initializing the for loop. You have for, part 1, part 2, and part 3, okay? Now the way parts 1 through, I'm just going to put this into a comment so you can see what I'm doing without it affecting our code. So what is part 1? Part 1 is equal to, basically you have to set up your loop. And the way you set up your loop is by saying, I have to have a starting variable, a starting position, right? Let's say I want to go from 1 to 3, and I want to increment it by 1 every time. So it starts at 1, at the end of all the functions it needs to do, it increments to 2. Is 2 greater than 3 or less than 3? Yes, it is. Repeat the loop. What happens if I add 1 to 2? It becomes 3. Is 3 less than 3? No, it isn't, so stop the loop. So the first part is to say, initialize the variable, the counting variable, right? The thing that counts the steps in the loop. The second part is all about what is the condition that has to be met, that has to be true in order for it to be able to continue into the next iteration of the loop. So what we say is, in this case, we call this a condition. So you remember the if statement. The if statement is a condition statement. If something is true, do the following. And in this case, in a for loop, you're saying, if my number is less than this bigger number, if that's true, then do whatever's inside me as a loop. So we say set up the test condition that allows the loop to continue. And part 3 is what happens at the end of a loop. What happens at the end of the loop? I've just finished one loop. I need to now add 1 to my counter variable, and then check to see if that counter is now above the maximum. What is the condition? Is it above 3? Oh yes it is, no more looping. So we say the part 3 is all about incrementing, well, what happens at the end of the loop. In this case, we're incrementing our starting variable. Make sense? I hope so. So we now have to convert this idea of the part 1, part 2, and part 3 into our for loop. And the way we do that is we say for, we need to create a variable. In this case, I'm going to call it wall pixels, and it's going to be an integer, so it just adds 1 every time. Wall pixels. Oh, and of course it's the Y wall pixels that we're drawing, because if you look at our grid, we're only talking about drawing pixels in the Y axis, so the height, the vertical I should say. So int wall pixels, and we're going to just initialize it as 0. Like all of our variables often begin as 0, we'll just start at 0. The next part is, what is the test condition? Now, wall pixels is counting the height, okay? It's counting the height of our wall that we're drawing, right? So we're going to say, we have to make sure that wall pixels is less than what? What is our height? Our height variable is stored as wall height. So it's less than wall height. And then our part 3 is what happens at the end of each loop. We have to increment wall pixels by 1. Wall pixels equals wall pixels plus 1. Great. And then we of course have our curly brackets like we normally do with large if statements. And I'm going to say inside of this, gamer.display x and y. Wall x, it'll always be wall x, which is in this case 7, but it'll always be wall x. And then what is the y position we're drawing to? We're drawing wall pixels, right? But look, wall pixels starts at 0 and it's always less than height. Remember, it needs to start from y position 2. It needs to start from wall y. Because if we look here, wall y starts at y equals 2. So we're just going to say our wall pixel, it needs to draw itself at wall pixels plus wall y. Okay? So a little bit of mathematics and boom, it should work for us. Is equal to 1. Let's see if that does the job. I'm going to, of course, comment out all the other display updates. Let's just see if that works. There it is. It's now drawing it to the screen, but it's using the for loop as a way to draw it. So let's see what happens if I change my starting, my wall y position to 1 and my height is equal to 5. Let's see what happens. So now using the loop system, it's going to redraw itself differently without me having to reprogram it in any clever way. Look at that. It starts higher up and it draws a total of 5 pixels. Perfect. So much easier. Thank you, the for loop. So we've just redrawn it to the screen we've drawn a wall to the screen using a for loop instead of having to hard code every single pixel for the wall that we want to display. That's so much easier. And now what I can also do is I can just change. Let's say I want to draw the wall from the top of the height, wall y equals 0, and I want the height to be equal to 8. Let's see what happens. Now what do you think will happen? We're literally drawing a wall from the top right-hand side to the bottom right-hand side. Boom, there it is. Brilliant. So that is obviously the wall that nobody can survive in their game of Dodge. Fantastic. The only other thing I'm going to change before we end this little class is I'm going to move my ship starting position to the beginning of the screen, the left-hand side of the screen, because right now it is right against the wall that gets drawn, so it's kind of difficult to dodge that. So let's re-upload that. There it is. We're ready to go. Thank you very much. And in our next class, what we're going to be doing is moving the wall from the right to the left-hand side.